And I think, and Sarah, are we going to make that recording public on the website or not decided yet?
We'll send the link out to the participants.
Okay, got it. All right.
Thanks.
All right. Well, let me just say welcome to everyone to the Center for Community and Citizen Science Collabinar. Very excited about this session today. Sometimes we are web only, but we're actually in person, some of us, which feels great. And some folks who are joining us today may not be all that familiar with the Center for Community and Citizen Science. So let me just say that we are a research center based at the School of Education here at UC Davis in California. And we do a variety of things related to public participation in science or community and citizen science. We conduct research on that, and then we also help lots of different partners to accomplish different goals through public participation in science. And so I invite you to explore our website, learn about our projects, and reach out if you'd like to engage on any of that stuff. We have a really wide variety of participants in the Collabinar today, which is super exciting, including folks from very far away from here. Thank you for joining us. And so I'd encourage you, if you are on Zoom, just take a second to introduce yourself in the chat so we can see who's part of the event. And then the last thing is that before we get started and I hand it off, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're gathered on here today. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of the Patwin people. And today there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes, the Cachodehi Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian community, Quetzaldehi Wintun Nation, and Yochadehi Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful, as always, to be here today on their traditional lands. Thank you all for being here, and I'll now pass it over to Sarah, who will get our Collabinar right.
Cool. Hi, everyone on Zoom land. I'm Sarah. I'm the Community Education and Outreach Specialist here at the center. I want to introduce you to what these Collabinar events are. So we're really excited to host colleagues from all over the world to present on their most interesting developments and challenges in the field of community and citizen science. Attending the Collabinar are people who engage with community and citizen science at different levels. So it makes it really fun and engaging. And we're seeing that come through in the chat right now with the introductions. So this about an hour-and-a-half session is going to discuss environmental learning and is less of a formally structured webinar as it is discussion with our presenter. So we'll have eyes on the chat to see if there are any questions that come through for discussion. We have a bit of a presentation to begin our time together to orient us to the people that are here in the room and what they're studying, and all kinds of questions that they have. So it's a back and forth between presenter and attendees. So yeah, lastly, of course, Ryan mentioned that this is being recorded. I'll share the link with attendees after the Collabinar is over. So I'll have Peggy and Heidi introduce our speaker today. We're really excited to have Catherine.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Peggy Hurt. I'm the Youth Education Program Manager here at the Center for Community and Citizen Science. And I am super excited to welcome our friend from Tanzania, Catherine Njau. And Catherine, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Njau from Tanzania. I'm so happy to be collaborating with Peggy and Heidi in this wonderful project on how to shift the idea of the students when they are learning inside the classroom and to make the implementation of those ideas in the garden. This is the wonderful project of our community based in that we can be able to integrate what specifically that the students can learn inside the classroom to their real life situation. I'm so happy today. I'm face-to-face physically at California, US, Davis, that I'm learning an actual practice on how to integrate science and English language in the garden. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Catherine. Can I also jump in?
I was going to say before we,
I think.
You want to
Who was able
introduce?
to advance the slides?
I am.
Okay, because I was gonna say the next slide is about the center.
Mhm.
Which Ryan has already talked about a little, but for those on the on Zoom, this is a little bit of visual for the things that Ryan just said. And also just wanted to give a little context. We're so glad that we've had the chance, the miraculous chance for Catherine to be here with us today, because we went to see her and didn't know that, or at the time, we had not arranged for this to happen, that she got a Fulbright. So Catherine is here in California as a Fulbright scholar. But at our sister college, Chico State. And so she's just come down for a couple of days to be with us. So we're really lucky. And I think that Peggy is going
You want to
to.
introduce yourself?
Oh, right, me. Hi, I'm Heidi Ballard. I'm just looking at people in the room. And we all know each other. So I'm Heidi Ballard. I'm the professor of environmental science education here in the School of Education at UC Davis, and the founder with Ryan and faculty director of the center that Ryan so eloquently described. And we've been around for six something years now. And this Collabinar series has been just an amazing chance to get to really think internationally, think nationally about the community and citizen science work that we're doing. So I think that the backstory is on me. We're gonna have Catherine introduce herself a little bit further. That's right. But maybe just for some context is that we collaboratively developed this presentation because it's been sort of this iterative back and forth collaboration over the last year, really, right, with Catherine. And so we're tag teaming. We've got our names on slides, but it'll be a little, iterative or back and forthy. But really want to highlight Catherine, give Catherine a chance to really tell us about where you have come from and your background and what brought you here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Heidi, to give me a time to talk about my background. I'm a teacher by profession, that I'm teaching English for 20 years now. And a part of my teaching, I was starting doing that other activities out of the classroom. It is where the idea of having my own organization known as Collabinar Youth Empowerment emerging when I was working with girls and boys about life skill education and youth empowerment. Then from there, I developed the idea of having my own organization known as Collabinar Youth Empowerment, focusing on education around the student health and hygiene. And through this organization, I was being able to establish a small project that are working with the students inside the classroom and outside of the community, like in service, that is in service training basic. Also has been able to attend in different associations that's promoting my English language and helping teachers in professional development. And I was being able to attend in TISO, which is the Teachers of English Speakers to Other Languages. This is the big association around the world. I attended their conferences. This is my third time that I'll be in person. And also for now, I'm still a regional coordinator of my own organization of English language in my country. That is TELTA, Tanzanian English Language Teachers Association. And now I'm so happy to engage the idea of gardening that I was established to the aim of supporting girls to have their own reusable sanitary pad when they learn how to make their own. You may find that that is the picture that I was starting the idea of producing the reusable sanitary pads to support girls from those who are coming from disadvantaged families. But through supporting them, we find that it is better for the students themselves to make their own reusable sanitary pads, that they can be more comfortable to know how they're going to use it and how to make it. So from there is where the idea of establish a small garden emerging, that the students can get an income from the garden and to start continuing have the fabric that they can use to make their own reusable sanitary pads. So thank you.
Yes, perfect. And so that's a perfect transition. So was at that point, Catherine and I had been, I guess there's no other way of putting it than Facebook friends, right? So we have been connected by friends in the medical field who had worked with Catherine on her female hygiene products program. And when she started the school garden program, That's when I reached out and said, I think there might be a way for us to collaborate here. And so it was about a year ago that that Heidi and Catherine and I started our conversations on what that type of school garden collaboration might look like.
Because, I mean, I think, I'm not sure if you actually said this explicitly, but we did, Peggy has tons and tons of work that she and others have done here at the center on school garden citizen science. And we've also got emerging projects on gardens in prisons and having incarcerated people helping with sort of contributing to science through data collection on pollinators and birds. And this is what Peggy has been doing with teachers all over our local region in school gardens. And that's where we said, oh my goodness, this connection between kids and students and teachers and health and the environment and science might lead us to a little baby seed grant from Global Affairs here at UC Davis. So maybe next slide. So the original, so the plan was for our overall goals were to partner together with Catherine and her organization and the school that she's hosted at, Lee Cream, and Mr. McCary is here on the line with us on Zoom today. We're so happy, the headmaster of the school that Catherine is based at, one of the schools. And we figured we were looking to address health, education, and environmental challenges and bring eventually community and citizen science-based monitoring and gardens to teachers and schools in Tanzania. And we weren't sure how close we might be able to come to that. Catherine and we worked together over Zoom and started to zero in on our goals and engage teachers with the goal of engaging teachers and kids in being able to bring some content into the garden work that they were doing, science and English literacy content. So we're going to talk more about that and ultimately addressing food security and gender equity challenges that Catherine was working on already. Next slide, I think. Get there. And it's me. And so basically this, a seed grant is a seed grant for a reason. So we weren't sure exactly what we were going to be able to accomplish in the time that we had and with the amount of funding that we had, but we knew that we wanted to support teachers to connect the science and English with their school gardens. And this is a photo from our visit, or no, Catherine, is this a photo from our visit? Yeah. And maybe begin to pilot the ways to make science and English accessible and meaningful for students through garden-based community and citizen science.
Can I just interject a tiny bit?
Yeah.
We're using the term competencies with regards to what we in the States would call like our state standards, our performance expectations, because those are the terms that are used in Tanzania as the teachers are shifting from very rote-based learning to competency-based learning. So we'll be using that term throughout.
And the next slide is Catherine.
Yes. Here is how I was being able to make the community-based approach to language learning, which is not normal to our curriculum. And I started by helping my students how to making their own liquid soap with the integration of the English language. For example, the pictures for that's the students, they are making the liquid soaps. And when they are using those different materials that they can mention them in a science. So from there is where I see the elements of connecting the community activities that can help the students to understand even some of the vocabularies where they can use in a science when they're learning, for example, chemistry and biology inside the classroom. Not only these projects, also I was being able to help my students to work on the community collection of reusable bottles around the environments. So they learn how to support their communities and to bring awareness to the community that the using of plastic bottles to the environment is bad to the pollution. So they know the importance of collecting the plastic bottles, and they know how now they are going to reuse and to recycle those plastic bottles. From there, they bring the awareness to the community and themselves. They can develop their English language. When they go back to the school, they can sit down and write in an essay about how to conserve their environment. Also, I'm working on this reusable sanitary pads. Now, in this reusable sanitary pads, it's not only the matter of making them and giving them to the students, but I sit down with them and teach them how to maintain them, how to make it hygiene, and also boys and girls who are sitting together and learning about the body changes. Through the learning of that body changes and mention the part of their bodies, which is not normal, they understand how they are developing themselves and how they are being changed themselves. So they understand it that for the boys, they know the challenges, what girls are facing when they are in the menstruation period. And for the girls themselves, they know how they're going to be the hygiene when they are using those reusable sanitary pads, and they'll be able to maintain all challenges that they can be on their side. And for the boys also, because these are the adolescent boys, they're going to prepare themselves to be the good fathers of tomorrow. We know that this is not a normal issue, which was being taught in our schools, but by starting this as a community-based approach, this now we are prepared these young boys to be the good fathers, to take care for their child. If they're going to get their daughters in the family, it will be easier for them to understand the challenges and how to overcome those challenges so that we can have the good and healthy family.
Next one, you and the two of you.
I do want to pause and thank everyone for comments in the chat. Because this is a Collabinar, the interactive portion is going to come towards the end of our presentation, but I did want to make note that if you have any questions throughout or want to chime in, please absolutely use the chat, and anyone in the room, as questions come up, feel free to chime in and raise those questions. So one of the first things when we first started planning was having a really rich conversation around some of the benefits that we had seen between the connections of garden-based learning and using community and citizen science monitoring to support both the engagement with the garden-based learning, but also content instruction in those places. So when we were focusing on planning out engagement for teachers, we focused on using that community-based approach to language and learning. So connecting students back to problems and initiatives that are happening in their own community, in their own backyard. We wanted to really highlight for students that they already have a lot of assets and resources available to them. And we wanted to really make clear for educators that these are resources that they can use to enhance students' learning and student experiences in the school garden and on the school campus more broadly. I was going to say, if you want to speak to the competencies.
Yeah, for the competence-based instruction approach, that is CBI, we found that there is the instructions that a teacher can use inside the classroom. And once you go to the environment, that is the community, it will be easy for the students to transfer exactly what they learn inside the classroom to their real environment. For example, you may teach the procedure of making liquid soap. That is the instruction. So the students will know that if you are not follow the real instruction on how to follow any rules or anything that is upon your real life, you're going to make it as a mistake. When you fail in following the instruction on how to make a liquid soap, at the end, you're not going to get a liquid soap. So this is a competence-based instruction approach, because the students will feel exactly what they are learning inside the classroom to their real life situation, and this will focus on both science and English instruction. Now, you will find that the purpose connection between the material being taught, this is when you go to the syllabus. When you go inside the syllabus, in the projects, for example, of gardening, the students are learning the nutrition, but sometimes they didn't know the types of the food that can make them to get a good balanced diet. So when they go to the garden, they can know that different vegetables that they can mix up and get a good balanced diet that they can use as the normal. And through this project, we find that many students now, they are feeling they feel motivation of establish their own garden at their home. Even the parents that support them to do that, they not feel like a burden. And also they are being able to commit the conservation of the environment, that they know that there is the good way that they can use their own ways to keep the environment clean. And that is the great things, knowledge of transferring what they learn inside the classroom to their real life situation.
So for those of you who might be familiar with the transition to the next generation science standards, Heidi and Catherine and I had a lot of conversations around the shift to an inquiry-based approach. So very similarly in Tanzania, they are shifting away from rote memorization into a more inquiry-based approach that they call a competence-based approach. So focusing across all different disciplines on engaging students in authentic ways to deepen their learning rather than just rote memorization. And so for all of us, it was really an exploration of first the syllabus, which in Tanzania are like our state standards, but then really looking deeply at what are students expected to be able to then do with this information. So before our visit in October of this year, like Heidi had mentioned, we spent about 6 months ahead of time mapping out ideas and planning, thanks to the everyone's proficiency in Zoom now. We were able to get over our time differences. So in this one, it's probably early morning for Heidi and I and late evening there for Catherine. And like she had mentioned, Mr. McCary is on, the headmaster of Leah Cream. And so it's very late at night here for him. So we appreciate everyone from Tanzania who is also joining us on a Friday. So we were able to connect over email and Zoom, thanks to Google Drive. We were able to share resources back and forth to really just get to know each other a little better. While Catherine and I had been Facebook friends for about 2 years, we had never connected live and in person. And we were able to really think through what opportunities we might have. We really weren't 100% sure. We went in with sketches of ideas and a lot of options for ourselves, but really mapping out what our goals might be and then what materials we might be able to bring with us from the United States that we could outfit schools with, and then be able to leave those resources there for each of the different campuses that were able to engage with us. Before we visited, Catherine had already, like she said, been working with different schools on beginning garden programs on their school campuses. So there were 5 sites that she had already installed school gardens with the teachers. Yes. She had been training the teachers, working with students. She had been fundraising. So those watering cans you see there were all from fundraisers she had done. All of this was not paid by any of the sites. This was all volunteer work and grant funding that Catherine was able to get these programs up and running on the different sites. And then she had identified 5 additional sites that were sort of primed for garden expansion. Right. And if you want to say a little more about the sites that you had selected, Catherine.
Yeah, these are the sites that we started implementing the projects of sewing reusable sanitary pads with connection of the garden. And I'm so happy with the teachers who supporting the idea of helping girls to sew their own reusable sanitary pads within their schools. And from there is where we have been able to start in the small garden. And all this, we found that this is for the idea of the last year project, which I posted on the Facebook. And my friends from different parts of the world, they donated on my page of GoFund page. I used that money to buy those water cans, seeds, and the materials that the students can make their own reusable sanitary pads. So I say thanks so much for the donors who support me, the idea that it is there. And now I see the fruit now. We are moving to the science and gardening. We are moving now to the science and English language within the garden. I'm so proud of that.
So yeah, this is me. You can see that Catherine is a force to be reckoned with. And so we were just kind of along for the ride in some cases about how this was gonna go. So we came and Catherine had established a total network of these schools and set up site visits for us all, which we'll talk about. In addition to, this is the overview of our visit in October, November. Sort of the two parts are the site visits and then the workshop itself that we did with the 2019 to 20 teachers from those 10 schools that we mentioned. So how about next slide? Yeah. What I learned how to make maps. Two maps just to orient you all, because this is a geography lesson today, right? So that's Tanzania, and of all the places in the whole country that we could have ended up collaborating, we collaborated with someone from Kilimanjaro region. So next slide. And I even found the school. Just even right, the border. This is the border. You can see the border with Kenya, and we're in northeastern Tanzania. And I picked the peak because that's where everybody climbs to, right? That's the Uhuru Peak, is the top of the Kilimanjaro. But so Marangu and Moshi are down in. I mean, Marangu is actually up the mountainside a bit, quite a bit, and Moshi's more down in the flats, about right, sort of more. It's much more dry and hot and arid down by the Moshi area. And so we actually had two schools that we visited up north of Moshi. Both of them are north of Moshi, is that right, Catherine? Yeah, I was trying to remember if we did a little something south, but two schools a little bit north of Moshi in the more arid areas, and then three schools based at the school that's Mr. McCarry's school, where we were sort of, it was really great to have a home base, and then get to visit lots of other schools as well. So Catherine had set up this is from our perspective, like she set up this amazing sort of system where at each of these schools, we met with the head of school, we got the tour of the school and the gardens, we met with the teachers leading the garden work, we got demonstrations by the students doing garden work, sometimes like this amazing well-oiled machine of like 60 students, and other times more informal, and some presentations and informal talking with the students as we were walking and hanging out. And so this was invaluable for us to be able to learn about the context and needs and interests of the teachers and students before trying to do some kind of workshop. Like that would have been absurd for us to presume to do some kind of teacher professional development workshop, not having gotten a chance to see what the context was. And really good to also, it turns out, build rapport with all those teachers. So when they came to the workshop, it wasn't like we were these completely foreign people coming in from outside. But
I was just gonna say, one of the reasons I loved your map and the conversation around how dramatically the terrain changes in that space is that we were really focused on inquiry-based approaches in the garden and what problems the students were trying to solve in their school garden. And so in Marangu, it was more talking about pest control and water movement, because it's a lot more rain up that way. And in Moshi, it was more about water capturing, because they're experiencing a very dramatic drought. And so it was really, really, like Heidi said, invaluable that we were able to see the problems that each of the different campuses were working with and resources.
How far apart are they in miles? Well, it took us 5 hours to get out to Moshi from the Ukraine, is that right? By car, or by bus.
Not private, by public.
Yeah, so it took a little longer because we were public, but and I think people should ask questions if they feel like it as we talk. And so the next bits are about, like, sort of Catherine and I, we were gonna have you were gonna talk about sort of how this experience was of us visiting the school sites was from your perspective and the students and teachers' perspectives.
So this project was so beneficial to my students that the visit of Peggy and Heidi physically to the schools, the students, they feel more motivated to know the importance of working in the garden. They feel more comfortable that what they are doing, it is meaningful to them. And some of them, they are so happy even to distinguish and to explain the different things that they found in the garden. I didn't realize that if they can be more comfortable to explain what they saw in the garden, but after the visit of my friend Peggy and Heidi, physically working with them in that garden, they have been able to distinguish types of the seed, and they've been able to explain types of vegetable that they planted in the garden. They explain many things that they know, which I didn't know before, that if they can be able to speak about that. So I was so happy to see my students, they are being motivated themselves without any access or any support of the teachers to speaking about what they see, but they've been able to explain in a deeply, show them different seeds, they crack the seed, they saw the dicotyledons and monocotyledons of the seed, the types of the maize, how they grow it. So it was so amazing to them, and it was so good that now they are ready to work in the garden even without the force of the teachers. This is the great motivation to my students.
Yeah, and there's more there's other photos here of the students doing the gardening and us touring the garden. And I was just gonna add that I know we had the amazing privilege of partway through our trip actually participating in the graduation ceremony of the Lily Korean School, secondary school, and see all these presentations from the different students that were like, it was very much like they had prepared a lot to give these presentations, and it was clear that they had practiced and rehearsed, and they were mostly very scripted. Whereas in the garden, they could really they just talked about what they were doing and why they were doing it, and we could ask questions. So it was really, I was hearing you talk about how they were more motivated sort of in the garden, and that's something I think a lot of the teachers talked about too. Is that it was this opportunity to just have organic conversation in a way that they actually don't get in class often. So that's I resonate with what you're saying.
And I just want to point out in the picture, what I think was so impressive to both Heidi and myself was the way that land is being used on all of these campuses. So these were not very formal school gardens. Like the image on the left is a much more built out garden. They had a much larger campus, but even on the image on the right, even in smaller campuses, they were using any space around the buildings, in the corner of campuses. They were squeezing just little plots wherever they could fit them. And so many of the campuses, it wasn't a very large formal garden, but patches of maybe 10 by 10 squares that might be all around the campus in various processes at different times of year.
Yeah.
And the next one's you guys.
Here you may see that
Just some photos from our trip.
you will see how the students, they are so happy to engage in this project, and they demonstrate how they saw different things in the garden. As the first picture there, you find that that's the students explain to Peggy. Is it Peggy? No,
Yeah.
it's Hey. No, it's Peggy.
Yeah.
Explain that here is a seed, and what they see that maybe the insect, the bad bait that can cause the diseases in the plant. So you remember that's how they are trying to work with us, to move in the garden, to collect information from the garden. Now, was wonderful information that the students they bring to us.
And one of the things that we found so beneficial during these visits to the different campuses was at the very beginning, we have been communicating on WhatsApp between the three of us, and then Mr. McCary.
We continue to communicate.
And then we created, after site number 2, a Kilimanjaro region teachers WhatsApp channel, and Heidi got very proficient in WhatsApp channels.
Really good at creating WhatsApp channels.
But what we didn't realize was how much this community was able to be built over the week and a half before our training.
Right.
And so we were visiting these schools for the first time. We would spend maybe a half a day at the campus, but because we were connecting with all of the teachers and administrators on the WhatsApp,
photos, really a lot of photo sharing.
a lot of photo sharing, a lot of communication, a lot of community building went in before the professional development, which really allowed for us to get much farther along. Our professional development was only one day. But because we had visited all of the campuses and understood the resources that the teachers had at each of their sites, they also had built out this relationship with each other as well as with us over that week and a half period. So I have to say, I was so grateful for what
Yeah, yeah, and I was astonished, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get to hear, yes. So this is you, Missy.
Missy. So after we visited all of the sites, we were able to sit down and really reflect on what the needs of the teachers were, what they said they needed as resources to be able to engage in this type of work, based on a lot of the feedback that we heard from students and some of the larger goals that Catherine had as part of this garden workshop rollout with the new sites as well. So we planned out a one-day professional development where we brought teachers, one teacher who taught science and one teacher who taught English at each of the 10 different sites. We also had additional teachers who were from a special day school at one of the local schools. And then we also had an administrator from, who was the administrator who joined us?
The administrator from the district education officer.
The district education office.
That's right, that's right.
Yes,
He was a surprise guy.
yes. And so we had about 20 people at the training that day, and we were able to go through a few different targets and goals. So one of the things that we did before we left was the team at the center here designed a poster that every teacher received, and you can see it behind Catherine's head in this presentation. If you are familiar with the scientific practices of the next generation science standards, you'll recognize the language on a lot of these, but really thinking about how we could support teachers in shifting from that rote memorization model to that inquiry-based, place-based, competency-based approach in their school gardens, connecting science instruction and English engagement on their school campuses.
I was just replying to Mr. McCary. He said that the Kokirie Secondary School has been implementing some of the things that we talked about in relation to your networking, the networking community that was built. So now you're on the goals, and that's YouTube.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we had the goals for the workshop, and this is to introduce the participants to community and citizen science and how to integrate into instructions. We prepare them to come to the workshop with their syllabus and their books that they can use in their teaching. Those who are teaching science, they brought some of their syllabus, and those who are teaching English, they brought also their syllabus. We share resources to support science and English language education and garden-based learning. And also we facilitate teachers to teachers training. And this is what we did together with Peggy and Heidi to facilitate their how now they can integrate science and English language within the garden. Teachers, they feel that they receive it in a positive ways. And one of the teachers said that it's not only science. I learned that the garden is not only for feed us the stomach, but also the garden is there to feed our brain. So we found that this is the great achievement because our teacher themselves within the workshop having been able to recognize the importance of using the knowledge inside the classroom to the garden. So we get the feedback at the end of the presentation. After being able to share and facilitate teachers, we receive this feedback to one of the teachers who participate in a program.
That was my favorite quote. The garden is not there to just fill our bellies, it's there to fill our minds. Yeah, so we were working with the teachers, focusing on shifting their pedagogical practices as well. So initially, earlier in the day, we gave them time after we had an initial exploration in the garden to come in and sit down with their job-alike colleagues. So science teachers were able to meet with science teachers from other schools, and the English teachers were able to all meet together and go through their syllabus or their standards and really reflect on where could they see students deepening engagement in the school gardens themselves. So as part of the kits, we had brought, oh, you don't have that, never mind. That's okay. I was just going to talk about some stuff. There we go.
Yeah, no. So just kind of just marching you through the day a little bit. We talked about the framework. We just wanted to make sure and share that this is a framework that has come from a lot of the research we've done here at the Center on Youth Learning and Community and Citizen Science. And so we sort of adapted, we talked about the competencies as well as the English and science competencies that Tanzanian teachers needed to sort of adhere to in their curriculum, and tried to integrate that with the sort of framework that we have for the sort of participating in authentic real science data collection, like pollinator data collection and iNaturalist species biodiversity data collection in their gardens, with sort of these educator practices that would eventually get to promoting youth having agency with environmental science themselves. So seeing ways they can use science to take action and sort of have more agency in their learning and in their community. So we designed it where we had the sort of 10 teachers that were from schools with they already had gardens that were in the pairs, 5 schools, 10 teachers. And then we had teachers that don't have gardens yet. I think we had a better term than teachers without gardens. It was like a very careful term that made them that was not a deficit approach to the garden, differently gardened. And so but basically they wanted, so Catherine could actually have some time with them. We rotated them through stations where when they were with Catherine, she was showing the less experienced folks how to install a garden in the first place. And the more when the more experienced teachers came, she and helped them show them how to install a compost pit and how the composting works and all of that. And students demonstrated that from the school. It was fantastic. And then meanwhile, Peggy, when they rotated to Peggy's group, she's going to talk about this, but Peggy, they engaged in connecting scientific sketching and English skills. So really connecting both those two disciplines together, but hands-on outside in the garden. Yeah, next slide, and that's you. And so, there it is, the thing that I just said you would talk about. There it is.
There we go. One of the things I think that was an unknown when we first went over was whether or not our normal, traditional, professional learning exercises that we go through here in the States with teachers would translate when you're crossing culture and language. And it turns out, no offense, Mr. McCary, but administrator jokes land anywhere, turns out. The teachers except for your school.
Being super supportive. Super cheerleading in the chat. You're like, yeah, we're still here.
But it turns out,
yeah.
But the other thing that we really wanted to show teachers was just like here in the States, when we're asking teachers to really shift, not just how they teach and the ways they instruct, but really shift their mindset to a more inquiry-based approach. The best way to do that and the most effective is to give them the same type of experience that we would be asking them to lead their students on, and then having them really reflect on ways in which that different model of instruction deepens student learning and engagement. So we asked them to go outside, and you'll see in this picture, the first thing we did was just ask them to pick a leaf from a plant in the garden and really take a moment to look at its structures, look at its function. We first talked a little bit about all of the different science content that could be drawn from that. And then I asked them to run through an activity we often do here, asking them to list out all of the things they notice, what they wonder, we went through a scientific sketching activity. And then once we completed with what we would run through as our typical science content, I then asked them to look at their own notebook and reflect on how much language they needed to use during those moments where they were taking their own notes, during those moments where they were talking with their partners, during those moments when they were asking questions and really probing each other. And so after running through some of the deepening science content and really talking about all of the different types of things you could observe in that garden, just by looking at a leaf, we then switched that. And it was so amazing how quickly teachers were able to jump to those connections very quickly. The science teachers reflected on how much language they were using. The English teachers then realized how much deeper they could ask their students to go if they were connecting to the same content that they were using in science.
Yeah. So we're gonna, I think we're close to wrapping up to get into the big questions for you guys at the end here. But the afternoon then was spent on what Peggy had been alluding to was the subject. You can go to the next slide, the subject area groups. So we really wanted to get all the science teachers together. I mean, I'm not there. What I didn't get the sense, Catherine, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that people got to do this very much, like mix and mingle with people from other schools that teach the same subject area that they do. That's does that happen very often for you in as a teacher?
Not often, because sometimes for the teachers to be together and learn together, it's not that easy because of the differences of the place that they're staying. So you find that sometimes it needs a lot of money to tell them to come. It is not our culture that we can call teachers and sit together without giving them food and everything that they need during the workshop.
And so we were able to do that. We were able to give them money for the travels. We were able to give them food, breakfast and lunch. And so so it's not that often that this gets happens.
Can I just give a shout out to Mr. McCary too?
Yeah, exactly.
Because one of the things that we really needed and depended on because of what we were asking from these 10 campuses was the administrator support. And Mr. McCary is a leader in the region and was able to call upon his other colleagues and the other administrators in the area and really talk to them about the benefits and what he saw as a regional program that they could begin building up together as an administrator group as well. While we were focusing on the teachers, Mr. McCary was really focusing on the administrators. So
and we didn't even know we didn't even know we were going to have that asset.
Right.
We got there with Peggy and I reflected on that after we came home, that it was Mr. McCary was amazing and supporting this. You guys are a really amazing team.
Thank you.
And so so subject area groups, and then this is YouTube talking about the connecting there. Once they were, so they got to spread out and be with people not from their school, but in their discipline. And then we mixed it back up where they were in their partners with their the same school.
From this connection, that I wrote a letter to my district education officers, and I selected a school that the head of the schools, they're interested in making this project in their school. And I'm so happy that I was receiving their feedback, except 2 schools that they were not able to attend. Is it through 3 schools? Yes, they were not able to attend to the program, but most of the schools that I called them, they will be able to attend on the program. And I got a great support from my district education officers to support these projects to be happening in our country. Then from there, we started with the school that those they have the garden and those who they don't have the garden, that to balance that those who they don't have the garden can learn from those who they have the garden and to make the implementation of these projects to go on. Then we select the teachers of 2 subjects, one from English subjects and one is a science subject. And all together we're meeting in at Mr. McCary's schools. And I was so happy it was during the examination, but he is very supportive that he gave us a chance to sit together in one building using his electricity and projectors and everything from the schools and be able to implement the idea that we have.
We'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, so throughout the day, as conversations were coming up, we had posters around the room where we were adding ideas of content for inquiry for students in the school garden. And so at the end of the day, after teachers had had the experiences of being in the garden, connecting English and science content standards, connecting to the iNaturalist Citizen Science Project, we gave them time to sit down with their school alike. So their partner from their own school, and really think about what the problems were within your school campus that students could learn how to advocate for changes or learn how to use their own monitoring to come up with ways to solve various problems on their school campus, and ways in which they could then use those campus-based issues and problem-based projects, solution-oriented projects, to then connect back to the competencies that support each other in both English and science.
So just the last piece is then we did ask teachers to write some reflections for us in a kind of an evaluation of the workshop sort of a way, right? But and so we asked what ideas do you now have for teaching at your school with your existing resources? What ideas do you have for connecting topics in your syllabus to the garden or your school environment? And what questions do you still have about classroom connections? You know, we didn't talk about, somehow, I don't know, I guess it got lost, was the iNaturalist. We did have them do iNaturalist.
We did, it was on the station slide.
Yeah, I was on the station slide and I skipped it, I think, basically. So the key is that we brought a bunch of iPads and had people go out into we tried to facilitate getting onto iNaturalist. We had set them all up to be, you know, password. I mean, everybody could log in and go introduced to the idea of making observations, making good photos. What does it mean to take good clear photos that can be identified? Who's identifying them? How do we uploading to the internet, which it turns out was a huge challenge because which we're going to talk about towards the end here. So the iNaturalist, we often consider it as kind of like a gateway to a lot of citizen science because it's so easy to just take a photo. You don't have to know how to identify anything. iNaturalist will help you identify it, right? And by submitting it, you can have faith that a scientist somewhere, probably maybe, is going to be using that data for their research, right? So we have there's that assumed definite connection and contribution to real scientific research that a participant might have. So we wanted people to be able to do that with iNaturalist, but there's no Wi-Fi anywhere at all. It's all satellite. And so what we had to do was hotspot our Tanzanian burner phones to the iPads. And so Catherine was hotspotting, Peggy and I were hotspotting, a couple of teachers were hotspotting, but it all costs money, right? That teachers do not have access to. And so they were totally into it. I mean, just the sheer fact of being able to zoom in and zoom out to find your location with the maps on iNaturalist was what my group spent most of its time on, right? Before even identifying or observing anything. So that's an important piece of what we did, but it was basically just barely dipping our toe in the water of doing citizen science in the garden. That's about as far as we got. And so the next slide is some of teachers were quite effusive in their writing. Like I was really ecstatic, right? I mean, oh, words, good. So people talked about, you know, and I mean, to be clear, this wasn't research yet of teacher learning and, you know, school garden citizen science, but we definitely got a lot of really good ideas about where they are in their thinking, and they were some of them focused on the technology and the iPads and saying, I really want to figure out how to do this more in my classroom. So each of the science kits included an iPad that we gave each of the schools, along with magnifying glasses and things like that to be able to make observations in the garden. Some of their questions were really like reflective of the content, you know, the challenges that they face just in general, limited resources in these schools that we definitely couldn't help with. But so lots of good feedback. And I think that leads us to the next, which is, so what do we do now? That was what we did first, what do we do now post-workshop is
Yeah.
kind of what I meant. We sat and met with Catherine. There's a photo of the three of us that we sat all day in Catherine's living room. We're working on things and ideas and notebooks and computers. So I think that I'm not sure.
So after the workshop,
Oh, it's your name.
what we did was we created a shared Google Drive. And so we had the resources from the day that teachers had experience with loaded. But then we also, as requests came up throughout the day of different ideas or different resources that teachers would appreciate, the wonderful thing about the shared Google Drive is that since the workshop, as I have gotten WhatsApp messages and emails from many of the teacher participants, as there are questions or as there are needs requests, I'm able to just share things digitally with the entire group. So we shared resources with the teachers for them to continue their student engagement. We are still working on that connection with local experts. That was something that teachers were very interested in, but is still at the very early ruminating stage. But still thinking through ways that we can build upon the energy of those teachers who were able to come and engage them as teacher leaders.
I was just gonna say like, yo, WhatsApp, still a thing. Still.
This is one of the participating teachers who just sent me this about 2 weeks ago.
This is Mr. Gerald.
Gerald from Collabinar.
Yes.
And he is an enthusiastic garden teacher leader, and so he's been sending us more updated. This is a new garden plot that they were installing, so he sent photos of that to us. I'm sorry, Catherine, did you want to say something on this slide?
Yeah, in this slide that we were making the follow-up for the teachers who have been able to attend the trainings, and I've already received the feedback to some of the teachers that they have been starting implementing the project in their schools. And Jero is the one example of the teacher that he is really doing what we have been trained together and working together. And also there are other teachers now, because it was near to the end of the closing of the school, we're going to the leave. So it was been very difficult for them to start it, but now we're in the first annual, we are in the first semester. So it will be easier for them to go on and implementing the project, even though still we are facing the challenge of water, because now we don't have a rain for almost 3 months. But I hope that when I be back, that many teachers will be able to start the project of gardening and take the students to the gardening and receiving a lot of feedback.
Yeah. So now we want to bring it out to y'all's, to the room and the Zoom room. Yes.
I have a question.
Okay, hit it.
You said that the teachers wanted to bring in local experts. What type of experts?
Well, I think that the conversation was ways to connect with community partners, not necessarily just experts. And it was really completely dependent on the needs of their site. So there were a lot of sites that talked about wanting to install water capture systems, and who do they contact and what resources and how can they get, a lot about pest management and ways to mitigate pests naturally so they're not spraying their gardens, because they are intended to be used in their school cafeterias. For those,
A lot of stuff that we can't actually do too much with.
yeah, the biology focused teachers were really excited about learning about who might be using that type of iNaturalist data in their local area. But because of the data set limitation and the data uploading, what we were hoping for initially was someone to start IDing the work. And we did get that a few days later, because Heidi and I had been taking a lot of photographs of birds outside our room. So we did see a lot of people giving feedback, but most of them were not local. And so there are a lot of needs identified, but we didn't make progress on, where to find those people.
So we want to get, I want to make sure because we've been talking for a really long time. I want to make sure we get everybody else involved here. So these are some of the ideas that we have talked about, the three of us, kind of thinking about where to go from here. And sort of from the practical side, either digital and in person, like sort of one of the things Peggy identified today was we could work more with Catherine on how to use iNaturalist and really all the ways you can bring iNaturalist to your classroom and to, really leverage it. And then she could teach some of the teachers in the region, right? Resources on water capture and pest management, which Peggy just talked about, more professional development for teachers to be self-sustaining. So basically, like, we barely got started. It felt like I was saying to Catherine, I was amazed at how far we got, but we really just did, we didn't get to go very deep with a lot of the topics we could have. And so what do we do to try to make that, take it the next step with those same teachers? And as well as Mr. McCary and sort of the administrators. And then, so there's going deeper with those same teachers, and then there's expanding to other schools, right? Do we want to go broader and try to expand to additional sites that Catherine's already, like, you're doing it already with the gardens and expanding the gardens, but to what extent do we want to try to expand this like idea of the content rich science and English literacy in the gardens?
I'm going to stop sharing and put the questions in the chat so that we can open it up.
So we can open it up.
Yeah.
So basically we want to get some feedback from you guys about those high level, the high level ideas. And one of the things we've talked about is that the high level piece is, when we just arrived, we found out that the Ministry of Education for Tanzania has said that school nutrition is so poor countrywide that schools should have gardens in every school, basically, right, Catherine? I mean, you informed us of that, right? And so we're like, well, then this is like this incredible model that we've sort of been developing that links it's not just about nutrition and right, it can also be about curriculum and getting these competencies reached. And so should we try to reach out to like government officials or, show this as a, like, call this a model and say that it's something that it can be promoted more widely or not. So, and then the other piece that we want your feedback on is, deep and wide, and what other things can we do? Go. And I'll take notes in the slides. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but I'll take notes.
A question first that I think is related, and first I need to say thank you, Catherine, Peggy, and Heidi for the great presentation. It's a very cool project. And I think you can call it a model because it seems like a fantastic kind of community-based informal model for building teacher support networks around garden-based learning.
Building teacher support networks for garden-based learning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We can workshop that.
Keep talking.
I have a question, and it's related to the last question that you guys have, which is about how to get teachers access to the internet to buy data. And I assume this is so that they can submit observations to something like iNaturalist. I'm wondering how important you see something like iNaturalist and citizen science even being to this project.
Right.
It sounds like there are opportunities for really rich science learning and English language learning without submitting data and submitting observations. So do you think that would still be exciting, or is there something about the citizen science piece specifically that you think would really enrich this project?
I think the reason that I wanted to focus on the getting access to the internet and having them be able to use data freely isn't only because of submitting to INAT, but also we are able to share a lot of resources from our end, as well as have them share resources with each other using Google Drive. And without access to that data, they can't actually do anything with it.
Right.
So we're able to send things, we can send document by document on WhatsApp, but for them to actually be able to use those resources in their classroom, they need to have internet access. So what I think was fascinating and was a sort of contradiction almost that Heidi and I had not planned on was the internet access in Tanzania is actually better than here in California. We had in terms of satellite, right? We were out in the middle of nowhere hiking up, halfway up Kilimanjaro. We never lost reception. We were able to get on the internet every single place we went to. But because it is all data driven, there is no such thing as an unlimited data, right? And so imagine like data plans, from 10 years ago, when, our cost structures were different here in California, where every moment is a charge.
Right.
And did you want to, I think that's the question I've been struggling with, is this idea of, so far, it seems like it's been quite impactful to even just talk about science and English in the garden, content in the garden. And because this is what we do here, is add this layer of citizen science and people really submitting and participating in science and submitting data and making observations and documenting it. How do you see the importance of that?
Yeah, the importance of that, first of all,
Or
they
not?
will understand how to use technology. Once you go to the World Map and see that the use of technology in the world, Tanzania, there is no data. Means that people, they're not involved in technology. Yeah. So by these projects, I know that teachers themselves could develop how to use technology. And they've got to understand how to shift the idea of the technology only for the communication. They can bring the technology to the classroom. Yeah. So the things that is an greater obstacle is that you have a phone like this, you need to have a chip, a card SIM card, then you need to buy a credit data so that you can access for the internet. So for the teacher, sometimes it is very difficult to stay online almost for 2 hours or for 3 hours because they're going to use their own money. So they find that maybe I can just only go to the WhatsApp for only short minutes and not for a long hours to work on the project like this. So that is the great challenge that the teachers face. They like it, they appreciate it, but how to implement it, they face that this is a burden to me because I'm going to use a lot of money to implement it. While it's a good thing. And when you go to the students also, they need to show the students the feedback. So also they need to apply the money, they need to use the money to make the data so that they can connect the students. And sometimes in the schools, we don't have the project like this, we don't have that screen that the students, they can see what they have been doing. So also that is a challenge also to the students themselves.
But it's interesting that you bring up the technology piece as the important piece, because I was thinking part of what Chris's question also was about, couldn't you do non-technology based citizen science, activities? So students collecting data on paper, right? And just, being able to make observations and put it, count the number of birds they see on paper, count the number of bees that visit a flower, and submit it to the teacher, and then the teacher can submit it, just one teacher submitting it to the scientists online. I don't know. And so I just wonder if that's, but you're saying it's the technology that's actually something that teachers want to bring in.
Yeah,
That is.
when the teachers, they need to use now technology. They need to know how to use the Google Slide. They need to know how to use all those tools in our teaching.
Other questions or comments or suggestions to us? Because now we still have 15 minutes for workshopping these ideas or giving answering questions.
I just like to, I'm gonna have to run. So hi Catherine, and also today, this is cool. It's really nice to hear about your work. And I don't actually have specific suggestions, but just that I've done work with a group in Zimbabwe called the Mwande Trust, and they do a lot of community-based research. And I just think at some point when we have time for this, it would be really cool to get you to talk with some of the folks from that group, because I think you could really share really wonderful ideas, both directions. And I just think it's so, I'm just listening to the things that you're talking about, both your other work, not just the gardens, but also the feminine hygiene, like, I know that the folks at Mwande would be so interested in that. And I just think and they do water harvesting in their very, very arid part of Zimbabwe. And so they might, anyway, just really cool. Would love to connect more when there's more time. And that's all I have to add at the moment.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you.
Say other thoughts or questions?
Feedback or questions.
I have a question for you, Catherine. First of all, your project is amazing. You've obviously done so much good work. I'm really curious, in the title of your program, you have the word Kuliana, and I was just curious in Swahili what that meant.
Kuliana means care. That is the care youth empowerment. So in English, that Kuliana means care, but we decided to select it in Swahili so it can bring the meaning that when we are trained as youth, then now this is the organization that it is care. So it is we are free to explain what we are facing, because most of the issues is about our personal issues. So it will be easy for the students to know that there is someone who will care for my personal issues. If I want to ask for any assistance, when I want to ask for any help, that I can be able to reach them and to support them.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've only ever heard that word in Hawaiian, and it means responsibility.
No kidding.
It's spelled the same way.
Wow,
Sounds the
that's
same too.
wacky. Those are care and responsibility. Those are kind of interestingly juxtaposed and yet
Thank you.
similar. Yeah.
That's what this caring for the guardian and caring for nature. It's the same. The same thing.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we didn't really talk about, was one of the reasons that we really identified that importance of connecting English language skills and science content with the garden is that the model of instruction is that in elementary or primary school in all of Tanzania, it is taught in Kiswahili.
Yes.
And then the transition is made in secondary school or middle and high school, that all content is then delivered in English.
Yeah.
So- And that's a big point, it's a big jump, right? It's a really big jump for students to transition to learning everything, all content areas in Kiswahili. For many of them, it's their second language already. And then to switch to deepening science content in secondary school, while at the same time transitioning to English in all content area subjects.
In addition to that, Peggy, you need to know that we have our mother tongue language and we have about 160 tribes. So we find that every places that students, they have got their own mother tongue language together with Kiswahili language to the English language. It's a big challenge for them to make that transition. So that's why you can find that when you make them to engage by seeing, by doing, by practice, and shift the idea to the implementation of using of those all three skills, it will be easier for them to motivate them to learn English language without forcing them that they are being motivated to learn English language. And you can find that that's why you find some of the students, they're very comfortable to explain in English, to speak in English, that's what they see, how they can use the vocabulary, different find the way of how they can pronounce it. So you find that even their English language is going up very fast.
When we were watching, when we came to visit your shop, your building of Kuliana, where we saw the sewing materials and everything, and the girls were showing us around, and I was taking notes feverishly, of course, the whole time in my notebook, and they kept looking and kept being very interested, and so I handed my notebook over and said, okay, you keep taking notes for me now, okay? And just loved it, dove in, right? Grace wrote paragraph, right, about what was going on. It was really very cool. So the English practice is something. Any other questions or like feedback, like what could we do next?
First.
No, I just, English is the foreign language for me, and had a master in TESOL as well. And it was like, yeah, I dreamed to have a project that was connecting the content knowledge to English learning, because myself had experience of have to learn science in Chinese and then have to take a science test in my master to get a teaching certificate. And to relearn the knowledge that was content knowledge was there, but just like the translation with the terms and use and expression of it, and observing kids who are immigrants to New York City to also have the transition period from the content knowledge to the English expression of that content knowledge was very struggling for them in a classroom that was totally abstract and at the same time frustrated in a way that they understand the content, but not able to perform it anywhere in English.
Mhm.
So that was very, very challenging for a lot of kids to have a transition period. So I was really, really curious about when they transition to the middle school, is there still have this in US, we call it bilingual education, to have those language still developing, because from the second language learning theory, and you're also familiar with that, how important it is to have developing the content knowledge with their first language, and then have the transition period to the second or third language. So I was wondering if there's any support built in that system, or if not, then how can the program like that have providing that type of support along the way?
Yeah, still, this is the debate in our country. We are struggling with the language. We don't have any solution from now. We are debating to our administrators and the Minister of Education and Professional Training that still they are thinking how now we can shift from using English language as medium of instruction to using Kiswahili, which is our national language for the learning. But it's still in the debating now. They are still debating how now they can go to change, because our country was colonized by the British. So we have inherited the British system of education. So this is still a challenge because we practiced this for many years. So once they go to the times of changing books, for example, they find that this is still a burden. And still there is a private school, which they're teaching that they're implementing the English as a curriculum. So that students can learn from primary school to secondary schools using the English language. So still we have a challenge that we don't know exactly which part of the language we should stand on that.
Yeah.
So once you go to the public school, this is a great challenge because most of the students from the public schools are those who they're coming from not good family. It's the family at the middle life or the poor. So they cannot manage to go to the private schools.
Yeah.
So you find that it's the part of the teachers to receive this burden of helping them. Yeah, to use different methods, to use different techniques to love them, to make sure that they've been able to cope with the language. And the language still is a great problem because once even we go to the assessment, it is very difficult to assess the student because they can understand the question, but when it comes to the part of how to answer the question by using English language is still a challenge. So we need to encourage them, we need to motivate them so that they can understand with the language and not using force to teach them. So we need to encourage them. So we find that by taking them out, seeing the things by eyes, practicing, touch them, it is easy. And also you find that we have many subjects. For a student to graduate, supposed to sit for the examination, not more than 7 subjects. The 7 subjects is the maximum and is the minimum, but they can do even more than 7 subjects. And in a subject, one subject is the big syllabus. So they learn a lot of content within one subject. So still, we need to make something to change our education system. But for me, it's not, I cannot do that now. But we need to bring awareness to the government to see all this done.
Well, I was wondering, because I was thinking to myself, like, because English is the standard language for secondary school, and this is such a powerful way of incorporating, and giving students a chance to practice and find meaning in learning English, but as an English teacher, you might have trouble answering this, but do you feel like because Swahili is the national language that the education system should transition to Swahili?
I find sometimes it is very difficult, even though, yes, for sometimes it can work. But I feel myself, I feel that it is difficult even for teachers to find vocabulary to use in Swahili. Yeah, sometimes to use vocabulary language of Swahili, it's sometimes a big problem. So we can say that we are not perfect in Swahili, and we are not either in English language. So we need to find the solutions and different strategies that we can use to remove the barrier.
I think one of the things, to your point too, Shalong, that when we look at what we know works for English language development for bilingual students here, in the States, but even when we look at the benefits of focusing on science content learning as a means to teach English literacy skills, that works for English only students as well.
Right.
And it deepens learning across the board. And so I think it's really looking at which of those pieces are true for language acquisition broadly. And then really focus with teachers on ways that they can support that, because it was almost, when the teachers would talk about translating materials into Kiswahili for students. They had to do it in secret, like their administrators would be mad at them if they translated materials. And so they would say, you know, we're only supposed to speak English to our students, but I still teach them in school, you know, like, but it was like secret. And it had to be like, you know, on the down low, they had to be like, you know, in hushed tones as they were talking about it. And so I think it's a lot of it is just opening it up for teachers, for them in their own personal experience to see the benefit. And then that will translate to what they're able to do in the classroom.
Okay, I'm looking at the time. It's 1:27.
Yes.
Sarah, do you have wrap up things you like to say, or?
Oh, yeah, so I think you all are already on the email list if you want to attend future Collabinars, and everybody who's still left on the Zoom, you can go ahead and do that. You can head to our website and find information on keeping up with the next Collabinars. We don't have one scheduled yet, but if you're on the list, you'll get notified of future events.
Excellent.
And we are really thankful that you were able to make it here today, so.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And thank you so much for joining us on Zoom, everybody. And blessed Mr. McCary wrote a note. So I had to be here.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks so much, Mama. I see Mama Ready is there. Thank you.